Imagine walking 1700 years ago through the city streets of what was once considered the center of the world, also known as the Roman Empire. But today, those same streets are silent, and the buildings that were once enormous are almost gone. The once mighty empire is now being lost to history. But what happened to this empire, and how did it suddenly just collapse? A large percentage of our Western thought and Western society is derived from Roman ideas and philosophy. A lot of what we do and have today originally came from what they believed and what they practiced and did. And it's influential to us as college students now learning in universities, as these are some of the people that we very much study as the founders of modern Western society. So, how did this Roman Empire suddenly just fall away? In this informative talk, I'm going to be citing information from history.com, Braddock, livescience.com, and Edward Gibson. The fall of the Roman Empire was not due to a single event, rather a combination of foreign invaders, economic turmoil, and just overexpansion, along with several other combining issues. But let's hit on that first term that we discussed, the foreign invaders. At the time, Rome was such a large, vast empire, and they were being attacked on multiple fronts. But one in particular is the Visigoths. This was a German group of people that lived towards the western side of the empire. And although they weren't very big people, they were known to be a traveling tribe of nomadic warriors. And these people actually sacked Rome in 410 AD, and this was due to a variety of reasons, mainly because of how poor the Romans had treated them in the past, and how they simply tossed them aside as barbarians, and so in retaliation they, over years of trying and war, eventually actually sacked the Roman city. And this is the first time that the Roman city had been invaded in almost 800 years, and this was degrading to the people that lived there, because what was once thought to be impenetrable was ultimately suddenly not a reality. Through these correlation of events, this turned other barbarians. Rome used a lot of barbarians actually to fight instead of Roman soldiers, and a lot of their conquerors a lot of times when they would invade another neighboring country or state, they would use barbarians from the surrounding area and pay them as mercenaries to do their work. And then they would also use Roman soldiers to train them. Unfortunately, around this time, these barbarian groups who were once subject to them now believed that maybe we could have power over them after watching the Visigoths invade Rome, and multiple of these groups turned and also attacked their own Roman captors and began to invade Rome themselves. And there's a quote here by Placket, said, "Many of the barbarians were constellations of soldiers that had been working for the Romans for several generations, and now these are the same people that were turning and invading them." And this is significant because not long after, only around 60 years later, the Western Empire suffered its death blow as Rome was captured for the final time. And at this point, I'd like to know that we've talked a little bit about how there's a Western Empire. And this is actually another one of the reasons for the fall of Rome, and that's because the empire was actually divided into two pieces. There was an eastern and a western part of the empire. In 324 AD, Constantine relocated one of the capitals to Byzantine, otherwise known as Constantinople. And this was significant. He did this for a variety of military and economic reasons. He relocated the capital away from Rome. But this came with a variety of issues because at the time it made things easier, but later would have other consequences. And then Theodosius, which is another Roman emperor, when he passed in 395 AD, Rome completely officially split into Western and Eastern empires. This is significant because they were still Roman and they still worked together, but they were so large and so divided that they divided into two separate empires as themselves, completely independent of each other, while still aiding each other and still under the name of Roman. But frankly, this was just too much land. The Western half was suffering from invasions and peasants and cities, and had grown weak compared to the East. On the East, there was abundance of trade and spices and wealth and stability, and this ultimately led to just division between the two nations that had formed, that were still both considered to be Roman. But there was division because of their differences in society and people and lifestyle. And the East and the West just did not work together well. They had different threats, different issues, different resources, and eventually just split morally. The people split in half. They just felt divided. And with so much territory, it was just a logistical nightmare to try to manage all of this. And so ultimately they ended up dividing in half and were no longer governing each other. There was no longer an emperor or a Caesar that covered all of Rome. In fact, they had two emperors who were covering different areas at the same time. And so we see that through the split and other things, this caused another variety of things, and we've covered the foreign invaders and the expansion, but this led to a variety of economic issues as well. And the biggest one was just plain out overspending. There was so much land to cover and so many invasions that the expenditures of military took a heavy toll on the people. And actually, I have with me a loaf of bread from a local supermarket. And this is symbolizing of something that a very Roman citizen would have eaten on a daily basis. But towards the fall of the empire, the average person couldn't afford due to the heavy taxes and tolls that were put on them to pay for this military and this expansion. And they also had a major reliance on slave labor, which was an issue at the time because this just slowed down the economy and innovation because it was mainly slaves that were doing the work and less people. While on the other side, we saw in the Eastern Empire, there was this high-class Roman citizens that lived these lavish lifestyles, otherwise known as the Greek life, as they spent and just wasted money. And in conclusion, all of these things led to the fall of the Roman Empire. It was multiple challenges, not really one big issue. From foreign invasions, economic troubles, and managing a vast, overextended territory, all these things together just led to the fall of the most dominant society in ancient history.